Greatly appreciate you taking a few minutes this morning.
Stick around and we'll get right to it.
Hey, welcome back, guys. Got a very special interview for you today with Dan, K2DMG. In case you've been living under a rock, Dan served as net control during the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Let's go ahead and jump right into the interview. I do appreciate you taking the time. I did follow quite a bit of what you were doing through Broadcastify. And man, I got to say right off the bat, fantastic job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So welcome this morning. I did take a look at your QRZ page. I saw that you've been a ham since 2001. Is this the first incident that you were involved in that required radio?
Yeah, on ham radio, yes. I've been involved in other incidents before in my professional career, but first emergency net I've ever ran on amateur radio.
Okay, all right. And you had power and internet the entire time. Is that correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. So you never had to worry or contend with losing that. Now, how did you find yourself in the role of net control? Was that something you guys had established beforehand that you would take the lead on this in an event?
No. I just woke up Saturday morning and turned the radio on, the Mount Mitchell repeater, and I noticed there was nobody talking. So I just put my call sign out and said, "Hey, anybody need anything from the storm?" And I had a backlog of people that came back to me stating, "Hey, I'm alive." And I said to myself, "What do you mean you're alive? We had the storm here. It wasn't bad at all."
Right.
Yeah, little did we know, 100 miles to the west of us was terrible. And those people were thankful to be alive for sure. So I just started making phone calls and text messages, and then that got to be too much. So I contacted a buddy of mine who lives down the street, who's a ham, and he came in and he started making phone calls. It got too busy for us, so we contacted another guy who lives in Statesville, and between the three of us, and then I think we even had a fourth in there at one point. Helping make calls and text as well to family members outside of the affected area.
So this was just kind of spontaneously born then for you being the net control operator.
Yeah, and I didn't call myself net control for probably a day or so, but people started calling me net control, and that's kind of how it all started, being net control,
So how long did you end up staying on the air? I know you were staying on the air for 10, 12 hours a day. How many consecutive days did you end up running as net control?
Started Saturday of the day after the storm, and then continued straight through the following Monday or Tuesday. So 9, 10 days, something like that.
Oh, wow. Wow. Now, I'm sure you have a day job, so how did you work that out?
Well, I have my own business now, so I'm luckily being able to stay home and run that. And for those 9, 10 days, my wife primarily took over the business so I could continue doing net control.
I totally understand that. We're self-employed, and my wife is an integral part of that.
Yeah.
And I would have to definitely lean on her if I
No
found
doubt.
myself in that same situation. Had you run net control before in, maybe a weekly Aries net or something like that?
No, I've never belonged to any group before. Just never really was my thing. We all have our own little niche in amateur radio, and mine is talking to friends, around the area and talking to friends back home in Western New York on HF. Never belonged to a club, never done anything like this before.
Oh, wow. That's pretty interesting that you had no experience going into this. That's definitely what you call trial by fire.
Yeah, no doubt.
So what was the experience like? I mean, once you found yourself in this role, just give me your insights to it.
Well, as I said, started Saturday just myself, and then brought a few guys in to help. And I felt like I was really attached to these folks, I didn't want to give the net up, to be honest with you. And one of the biggest reasons I gave it up is because Milton was coming to Florida, and my parents were not going to evacuate. So anytime they don't evacuate, me being the good son, I go down to Florida. So I rode out the storm in Florida with them in case there was any damage or anything they needed help with. So I gave the net up to the lady who's currently running it, and she's much better at logistics than I am. I openly admit I am not the logistical person. I'm more the emergency side of things, just because of my previous careers.
Now, okay, so you spoke about logistics and kind of keeping up with things. What methods or controls did you have in place to track all of this traffic? Because I mean, I would turn this on, and I mean, it would be a nonstop stream of people coming in either with welfare checks or telling you where gas was or wasn't,
Yeah.
if they were taking cash or card. How did you track all of that?
I'm kind of old school in that way of thinking. I have everything on paper. I got them right on the side of me right now. Everything that I did right on paper. There were other people that became involved, like the EOC and stuff like that, who were taking more digital type notes and stuff. But I still have everything right here that I wrote down.
You are definitely going to have to make copies of that. That may go in an archive somewhere
Yeah,
because
exactly.
listening to you, you will definitely become a case study in how you should do it. It
Gotcha.
really was well done. Now, did you use, I heard you on 2 meters. I believe that was the Mount Mitchell repeater. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
All right. And did you use any HF during this period?
No, not really. The state EOC was set up with Oxcom on 7232 on 40.
Hmm.
Um, but I kind of found that a little strange that they would be using a HF. I understand that that's probably their protocol, but in this particular situation where everything was cut off from water to electricity to internet to cell phones, and just going through 100-mile-an-hour storm, how many antennas were still up in the air hanging in trees while all the trees were on the ground? So I found it a little intuitive that's what they were requesting, but everybody has an HT, and
Right.
anybody can power it on, and the net really took off from there because it was such easy access.
So you were taking these calls and gathering information. Something I think as radio operators we often overlook is I may be in the middle of this situation where I have no power and no internet, but you maintain power and internet. So, how heavy did you rely on the internet to gather and distribute? Maybe you were gathering it online, but then distributing it over HF. So, how much of the internet did you really rely on?
In the beginning, none. Really, the only thing we used in the beginning were our cell phones to call and text family outside the affected area that, hey, your loved one is still alive. We heard from them. They wanted us to contact you. As the days progressed and people wanted to know what roads were open, how do I get here to here because these roads are closed? Can you give me advice on how to get there? And we relied heavily on Google Maps and Waze and other mapping software to get them routes around.
And I believe, if I remember right, from listening to that, you also relied pretty heavily on Facebook to get updates from all of the
Yes.
impacted areas.
Yeah, at 7 p.m. every night, I would do the daily update, if you will. I would go to every county in the affected area of Western North Carolina and get the updates that those counties put on their social media pages. Some of them didn't use social media at all, so they would do updates on their own web pages. And I would I would read them word for word, pretty much out to the people in the affected area because they had obviously no access to that.
So, are you still doing those nightly updates?
No, Vicky has taken over the net primarily, and the only updates that I believe they're doing now are from the Avery County Airport, where her and a few of the folks up there have set up logistics, handing out food and other sort of supplies up in the Avery County area.
All right. And did you just build this information list on the fly? Because I doubt you had a predefined list of all of these social media accounts.
Uh, on the fly. That's exactly right. Did it on the fly.
Okay. Um, Now, I'm a big digital guy, so I'm curious, did you use WinLink at all during this event?
I personally did not. So the way it started was Saturday. I ran everything out of my house doing cell phones and text messaging. The one person that I asked to come on with me, he is with the local Aries group and is Oxcom certified as well. And the very next day on Sunday, they asked me to come work out of the EOC if I was going to continue running the net. That, hey, this was looking good for the county. Let's get the county involved and let's work, with county officials on this. So I agreed. I mean, Saturday when I went to bed, I was on cloud nine, man. I was pumped that we had just helped so many people. And Sunday, got up early, went to the EOC, and I thought, I've never been to our EOC. I was in law enforcement and the fire department here in this county, but I was the guy in the road. I never went to the EOC. So I thought, oh, we're gonna have radios, we're gonna have antennas, we'll have computers. And we got there and we had a conference table. That was it. So we brought our own radios, we brought antennas and coax, we spliced coax together and through barrel connectors and stuff. And what I found was, listen, I have a nice shack. I openly admit that. I'm very lucky. What we had there was not so nice. We were using older equipment. Speakers weren't good. Mic cords were all stretched out. Mics were broken. And people even said to me on the net, hey, I don't know what you changed, but you don't sound as good. So we continued Sunday at the EOC, but we found out real fast that we should probably keep it done at our house. So starting back Monday, we were at the house using my equipment. And as for WinLink, no, I did not use it, but I believe the EOC, because once we changed things going to the EOC, we would give the EOC the information via email. They would then forward it on to the state, and I believe they were using WinLink for that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was just curious because, like I said, I'm a big digital guy, and I didn't remember hearing you put out any kind of WinLink address that they could send anything to. So I was just kind of curious if you did utilize that.
So the ARRL got a hold of this fairly early on. Monday morning, I woke up to an ARRL message, and my personal email was attached to that. So once that went viral, I got hundreds and hundreds of emails daily, literally daily. Hey, can you check on my loved one? I haven't heard from them. And our ELC set up an email address. So people would have forwarding my address to my personal email. I would forward that to the EOC. The EOC then would send that out on WinLink or whatever else they were using to get it to the state.
Now, I also heard you take pauses at various times. You would tell that you had a phone call coming in, and then you would come back and say, yeah, that was some state official or some sheriff or whatever. How did that happen? How did they figure out to call you that you were the one with this information?
To be honest with you, I don't know. But here locally, I know all the county officials locally, the sheriff who I used to work for, and all the elected officials I'm fairly good friends with because of my business. So they all know me personally. As for the state side, when they started calling and all the Oxcom guys, no idea where they got my number, but the calls were starting to come in.
Yeah, I knew, especially I think about the fourth day, maybe fifth day, you were definitely fielding a lot of those calls.
Yes.
And I was just curious.
It got busy there for a while there.
Well, and it makes sense if you've got a law enforcement background, you do have relationships, built prior to this, that at least your local guys would have that information. But once it started spreading out, that was kind of fascinating. So do you know off the top of your head how many different people you talked to, licensed and unlicensed, during the event?
No, I mean, I could go through all the records right there and, just start counting call signs going down through the list, but it's into the thousands. Absolutely no doubt.
Wow.
I have 4 yellow pads filled every single page. So, and you can write 30 or 40 on one page,
Wow. Yeah, I was curious if you kept any kind of a log. So it sounds like you did. Not a log, maybe we would think about just making contacts, but you do have a list of people that you talk to.
Yeah, I sure do.
Hold on one second here. Oh, have you been able to speak to anyone afterwards that maybe you helped while you were on the air?
Yeah, at nighttime they do what they call the round table or something on the Mount Mitchell repeater. And it's a lot of the folks that are in the affected area, because that's where this repeater is, over in Mount Mitchell in Yancey County. which was a devastated county, by the way. So I've been able to talk to them on the phone, on Facebook, and on the radio regularly. One particular gentleman, his name is Ed, and for EDX, him and I were kind of really running the show there in the very first day or two of trying to get people help. He was a tremendous help. Meanwhile, he lost everything he had. I mean, just just that type of guy, wanting to help others before himself.
Now, I believe I've heard you mention that the repeater was running on backup power generator batteries. Do you know?
Yeah, it's a diesel generator that kept it up and running. I guess it has a couple 100-gallon diesel generator tank for that. It's a very well protected site, being up that high. There's not only amateur stuff on it through the NG or N2GE repeater. There are other local, state, and federal stuff up there as well. So it's a protected area. And Billy Graham was essentially the one who got that repeater to stay up in that area when it was threatened at one point.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's pretty cool. So since it's tied in to the state stuff, that generator supplies power for all of the equipment on the mountain.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, it's very heavily protected with backup stuff.
All right. All right. So looking back, if you had to do it over again, what would you do differently? Or would you do anything differently?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. I have, like I said, 4 notepads here of call signs and addresses. Maybe I should have been more prepared um, to somehow get that into a database. I've made copies of this for certain individuals who wanted it to start data logging all that, but just getting on the air at 9 o'clock Saturday morning, not thinking anything of what it was going to turn into. I just wasn't prepared. And, this is probably a good thing to learn from, as in we have to have that, not only a radio be prepared, but we have to have the software to be prepared. And, I learned a lot during this, as in Oxcom versus Aries. In my interpretation of what Oxcom was, it was absolutely false. I thought they were the emergency guys. They were going to come in, take over, and that wasn't the case. I learned very fast after one of those particular phone calls that you were talking about just a few minutes ago. Oxcom, while it's a prerequisite to be an amateur radio operator, that's not their main objective. Their main objective is to go out into the field with field units, first responders, and provide communications for them. Have it be amateur radio, or in this case, the North Carolina Viper statewide system, which is a P25 trunking system on 700 and 800 megahertz. That is their main goal. It's not amateur radio whatsoever. So what we learned was Aries really is important, because Aries works at the local level and can be activated by local officials, where Oxcom can't be. That's strictly done by state officials. So it was really neat to learn that now, thankfully. And I have no interest in Oxcom. I have all interest in Aries, because, we work on the local level.
Well, and to kind of expand on that a little bit, I think it's critical for adjacent counties, at least their Aries groups, to have a working relationship, because obviously you weren't in the heaviest impacted area. You kept everything, and they could lean on your internet and your power, commercial power there, to help them out in the areas that were heavily impacted and had lost those resources.
Correct.
So, anything else, any wisdom you could pass along, other than being more prepared with being in your Aries group, having software available, anything else you could pass along that people should kind of think about that maybe you hadn't thought about before this event happened?
Not so much before, but after. You really, if you're going to get involved in something like this, have it be through Aries or just ad hoc like I did, you have to have a sound mind. You can't run on emotion. There are definitely people that have been active in this that do run on emotion. And when you do that, it amps everybody else up for no reason. You have to have a solid core and not be emotionally attached or emotionally driven, I guess is the better way of saying it. because when that starts happening, things start fraying very fast. You got to keep everything cool, calm, and collected, and I think we did a pretty good job of that. But there were other people that got in there that tried to use emotion, and I shut it down fast.
And I'm sure your background in your professional background helped you to maintain that discipline.
Most certainly, yep.
So, what was the most memorable call that you took out of this whole event?
There's quite a few of them, but I'll be honest with you, it's one that I've said to some other interviews I've done as well. And it was on that very first morning, Saturday morning. It was probably the second or third person I talked to, and I've already mentioned him once. His name was Ed. Lives in Swannanoa, in an absolutely devastated area of Swannanoa, which is on the east side of Asheville, right on the side of a mountain. And he immediately called in and said, "I have an emergency. Go ahead. I've never talked to this guy a day in my life, never heard him on the radio, nothing." He goes, "I have a deceased individual in my tree. Can you get me help to get this person, taken out of the tree?" And we did immediately get that over to Highway Patrol. But unfortunately, just because of the way it happened, that person was in that tree for another 48 hours before somebody come and got him out. And, we're hearing stories of all the time, but that is probably, just because it was the first one that we took like that, it's probably the most memorable, obviously. It's the one that I remember off the top of my head. I mean, there were others like that we fielded as well, but that was the first one. And it made me realize just real fast just how devastated the area was.
What a chilling call to take.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Gives me goosebumps today even thinking about it.
Yeah, me and you both. So, flipping that a little bit, what was the happiest call you took, or the call that made you the happiest, being able to help, or I don't know.
I didn't know this right away until the local media got a hold of this, and then the stories started coming in on how people were using the net to get to their loved ones, and that I had no idea about. I had one of the local NBC affiliates here in Charlotte come interview me, and they told me of a story of a family that was coming from Alabama to rescue their 80-some-year-old grandfather. And I don't know if I ever talked to them on the radio. If I did, I don't remember. I don't know if they're amateur radio operators or not, but they were listening to us, and they were listening to all our road updates to get to their grandfather, because North Carolina DOT quickly put on Google Maps that Interstate 40 was closed from Statesville, which is here in Iredell County, all the way to Asheville, all the way to the state line, a matter of fact, to Tennessee. It wasn't closed, but they did that simply so they wouldn't have to deal with the truckers going towards Asheville just to have to turn them around. So they put it out that it was closed, and it might even still show that. I'm not sure, because that area is still closed. But hearing that story from the local news media, that I helped some family that drove here from Alabama that I've never met, I thought that was pretty cool. I really did. And the story with Ed there, happy that I got him the help, to get that deceased individual out of his front yard's tree. Those are the little things that you think of later on, and like, wow, I really did help make some sort of difference for these folks.
Yeah, knowing that went out over Broadcastify, that for the entire duration, you may never know some of the people that you helped as you posted that information and gave that updates. There could be people that just found it on Broadcastify and have nothing, have no knowledge of ham radio whatsoever.
And I didn't even know it was on Broadcastify, to be honest with you, until probably 2 or 3 days later. When I started getting emails from people, once the ARRL put my email out, I started getting these emails. We're listening to you on Broadcastify. I didn't even know about it at the time. I probably would have chosen some words a little more carefully, knowing that,
Yeah, I get it. Well, maybe we need to have a discussion with the ARRL about putting out private information.
You know what? It all worked out in the end, but they've been good to deal with. I've had some interaction with them. They've actually done a couple stories now on their website with me included in it, and so it's been really cool. Just I'm not a big recognition guy. I mean, even doing these Zooms is weird to me. I kind of like to stay in the back scenes, but it's nice to have the recognition, I guess, and get the story out there.
You kind of put yourself in the spotlight whether you meant to or not.
Yeah, I didn't mean to. Let's put it that way.
No, I totally get it. So, what was the biggest success story out of all of this?
I don't know if there is a particular one that I could have mentioned to you. Seeing what the net has turned into, maybe that would be it. Um, I openly admit I'm not a logistics guy. I'm very good on a radio, helping in an emergency from my professional career to now apparently on amateur radio. But just to see what the net has moved into, getting hundreds and thousands of people help with food and cold weather gear, because I mean the nighttime now is into the 30s up in the mountains with snow flying in certain parts. Just seeing that what I started has now transformed into something helping thousands of people with airdrops and supplies. I think that's awesome.
That is pretty awesome. Is there anything else that I haven't touched on that you want to get out there?
Not really, other than, thanks to everybody that's reached out. I think it's pretty cool to hear from hams in Australia and England. And, I got an email from a guy in Turkey, not too long ago, listening to you on Broadcastify, I think that's pretty cool. I got reached out to by Gigaparts and DX Engineering, ICOM America. The Today Show even contacted me.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I mean, it's been really cool just to try to get the story of amateur radio out there. I mean, obviously, we all know our amateur radio hobby is kind of made fun of in sometimes, but now seeing just how important it is really really neat. I'm glad to be part of that.
It'll be interesting to look back and see what the increase is in licenses, new licenses that come out in that area. That's all because of what happened, what you were a part of.
When
I
I
think it's
tell
going to,
you I've received dozens of emails of people that have been licensed in the past 2 weeks, it's unbelievable. Dozens, literally dozens. And they're
I
all
like,
KQ4 and KQ5, really up there in the lettering system of new calls, so that's how you know they're new.
yeah, I definitely think that what you've done will be an impact for many years going forward. Like I said, I really believe you will be a case study on how things should be done if someone else is faced with this event.
Yeah, I'm a guy who doesn't follow authority very well. I don't care for rules. I don't care for people who try to put their rules on me when they have no authority to give me. And I kind of started getting into that a little bit with certain individuals, because we were allowing non-licensed operators on the repeater, but if they're out there doing search and rescue missions, if they don't have a license and they need information, I brought them in. I had no problem with that. And especially in the first day or two where people were trying to get their message out that they were alive, I had no problem with anybody coming on the radio, none at all. That's the definition of in an emergency. There's no food, there's no water, no electricity, no phone, no internet. The only form of communication was amateur radio, plain and simple.
Well, and I believe when you're in the heat of the battle, the armchair quarterbacks don't matter too much.
No, they don't. And it's funny listening to some of them online. There's a couple Reddits people sent me. I didn't even know what Reddit was until all this, but it's apparently some where keyboard warriors like to go talk. But there's a couple of them out there that I just sit there and laugh at, so it's kind of funny. And the other one there was one that I read that people were upset that I was allowing rag chewing. Well, you know what? These people just were devastated. They want to make sure their friends and family are okay. Amateur radio becomes a family. You talk to these people for years on a repeater. I let the guys rag chew. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, when there was no emergency traffic to be passed.
So, looking back or looking at your setup, of course, like we've said, you didn't lose power or internet. Is there anything you plan to change or do differently in your home shack because of this experience?
So I'm pretty lucky, as I said. I have a nice shack. I have an older 746 here. That's being replaced, and ICOM America. I'm not going to get into that yet, but ICOM America has stepped up to do that for me. We'll release that at a later date. But I think one thing that I've always had a generator. I think it's something that I'm going to have to move into back feeding the house for this, getting the setup for that. Because right now I run extension cords. Now we were really lucky not to lose power here, but even if I had no power, I would have had the generator to run all this stuff, and I probably would have still done it. It just, radio's my life, outside of, work and family.
Do you have battery backups for your shack?
I do not know. No battery
Okay.
whatsoever.
All right.
Just
Curious.
Generator.
Dan, I greatly appreciate you taking this time with me this morning.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm glad we were able to sit down and talk for a few minutes here.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that's it. Until next time, 7-3.
73, sir.